Hello, and welcome back to Bombchu. Today we'll be taking a look at the Humble Choice May 2021 bundle. The grass is growing, the flowers are blooming, and a lot of us still can't go outside. So as usual, it's a great time to keep playing video games. Grab a soda, pop some allergy medicine, and let's dig into this month's games. This month's Humble Original is Summertime Madness, a first-person puzzle adventure game in which you play an artist trying to escape his own painting. You live in a war-torn country, and a mysterious man offers you an escape into one of your paintings, with a catch. You have until midnight to escape the painting, or become trapped there forever. If you choose Classic Mode, this means you have 6 hours to complete the game, and if you play on Advanced, you get a whopping 3 hours to reach the end. As you enter the painting, you get to see a beautiful island with some really lovely visuals. If you aren't sure where to go, it will become obvious pretty quick, and you'll be on to your first puzzle. For how beautiful and relaxing the music and visuals are, this is definitely not an easygoing puzzle game, and it's extra stressful with a time limit hanging over your head. You can check your clock at any time to see how much time you have left, and even click the clock for a hint. But be warned that getting a hint will cost you precious time, and the one hint I got was not a helpful one, so I don't recommend using this feature. The atmosphere and the structure of the game may not seem to go together at first, but completing non-trivial puzzles rewards you with the next striking visual area for a breathtaking moment, followed by another thinker of a puzzle to solve. Given an easy mode where I could take my time to work through each puzzle in peace, I would be very interested in finishing this game. Heck, even with the stressful time limit in place, I really would love to see the other areas, but I really do get stressed out by the time limit. This should be a major hit for anyone who doesn't shy away from a challenging puzzle game.
Vane is an adventure game from developer Friend and Foe and released in 2019. Vane has you taking control of a boy who is transformed into a bird after being sucked up into a tornado. I think? Maybe you're a bird who gets transformed into a boy after touching some gold stuff. I'm not really sure, but either way you could transform back and forth between boy and bird. When you control the bird, you can fly around, and you're usually looking to help free and direct your bird friends to certain points in the area. As the boy, you'll be pushing and pulling different objects to help solve puzzles and find your way to the next area. It's a neat symmetry between the two characters, and I enjoyed the gameplay dynamic between the two sides. Controlling the bird is definitely one of the highlights for this game. Soaring around areas feels fantastic, and nothing quite matches that feeling of diving deep down into a canyon and swooping back up at the last second. Controlling the boy, however, is not quite as fun. The boy is rather sluggish, and while the ability to grab and push things adds to the gameplay, I still felt my fun levels drop every time I needed to go into boy mode in order to progress. The story is kind of nebulous and definitely feels reminiscent of games like Journey or Abzu. I won't go into much detail here, as the bits and pieces of story you do get are better experience for yourself. Visually, Vane looks fantastic. It's got a wonderful aesthetic that really made me love just looking around at the world. The music is also worth noting, as it would go from beautiful electronic orchestras to ominous and dread-inducing synthwave in a single scene, all without either of them feeling out of place. Vane is a short experience, clocking in at around 3 to 5 hours long, and it can be frustrating at times. The pace of puzzle solving, especially playing as the boy, can be very slow and plodding, and I often found myself fighting with the camera, and the lack of direction can be frustrating. However, despite being a somewhat flawed experience, Vane is still incredibly fun and memorable. If you're a fan of the one-time experience games like Journey or Abzu, you'll definitely enjoy your time with Vane. If those games didn't do it for you, Vane isn't going to change your mind, however, and your time would probably be best spent elsewhere. Family Man is a first-person RPG from developer Broken Bear Games and released in May of last year. Family Man puts you in the shoes of Joe, a regular guy who has a penchant for getting into bar fights and making bad decisions. One day a friend of yours convinces you to do something illegal. It ends up backfiring, you lose your job, and you end up in debt to the mob. How you pay back the mob is up to you. The story for the game is fairly basic, and other than one curveball that got past me in the beginning, it seemed to get the job done without being overly impressive. However, the game does boast about having multiple endings depending on what choices you make, so hopefully the story does manage to draw me in at some point. Each day you have free reign to go about the local town, earning money however you can. Most of your cash will come from doing quests for people. This can range from putting up missing persons posters, flipping burgers, and possibly swiping cash from the register when no one's looking, all the way up to killing people for the mob. Gameplay is pretty simple, with most stuff boiling down to just interacting with the thing and waiting for a moment before moving on to the next thing, or returning to the person who gave you the thing quest when you're done. Completing tasks will award you XP, increasing your level and giving you perk points that you can use to gain new abilities or just grow more powerful in general. There's some basic combat as well, with you able to punch, block, and charge up a power attack. It's pretty basic, and most of the combat I did encounter was won by just spamming punch, or lost because the other person was way above my level. Visually, the game is pretty simple, using a blocky Minecraft or Roblox-inspired look to mediocre effect. It's not that the visuals are necessarily bad, it's just not my favorite style, so it's not as enjoyable for me as it will be for some others. I also found the music to be pretty awful all throughout my time with the game. It didn't take long before I put it on mute and started listening to a Spotify playlist instead. Overall, Family Man is pretty simple and basic from almost every aspect. However, that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my time with the game. In fact, that sort of mindless simplicity is exactly what I need in a game from time to time. It's not super flashy, and it has its flaws for sure, but Family Man is surprisingly fun if you could turn down your expectations a bit and just enjoy the experience.
Retimed is a 4-player side-scrolling online shooter. I know these seem like a dime a dozen, but stick with me. On the default setting, you spawn with 4 bullets. You can use bullets to shoot, obviously, and if someone shoots in your direction, time will slow down in a bubble around you, allowing you to react. If you have any leftover ammo and can't dodge an incoming bullet with regular movement, you can consume a bullet to do a dash, or if you're feeling confident, you can shoot an enemy bullet to deflect it. That is essentially the game, and while it sounds pretty shallow, Tyler, Chris, and I had a lot of fun with the moment-to-moment gameplay. Running out of ammo and waiting for the next ammo box to spawn filled the game with tension, and different levels came with different mechanics to keep us on our toes, like portals you can both walk and shoot through, as well as icicles you can shoot to drop on your opponent's heads. There are also a ton of modifiers to play with, like bullet size, ricochet mechanics, and many, many more. I wouldn't say this game is a reason to pick up the bundle, or that it's worth the MSRP of $15, but I will say that if you pick up this bundle along with a few friends, there's definitely some fun to be had with Retimed.
Relicta is a physics-based first-person puzzle game from developer Mighty Polygon and released in August of last year. Relicta has players controlling Dr. Angelica Patel, a research scientist currently stationed on the moon. She's part of a research team conducting scientific experiments based around a set of gloves that allow her to manipulate gravity and magnetism. While awaiting the arrival of her daughter to join her at the research base, something goes wrong with the station's AI, and soon members of her team are cut off from each other and lost in the different biomes of the lunar base. So it's up to you to solve puzzles, reach your team, and figure out what's going on. I'll be honest, the story had me rolling my eyes and losing interest pretty quickly. It all feels like a knockoff of Portal, with gloves instead of a gun, minus all the charm and humor. However, while the story hasn't really improved much during my time with the game, I really didn't mind all that much. It's serviceable and it keeps things moving forward, while allowing you to focus on the real meat of this game, the puzzles. You have a few key abilities at your command. You can pick up boxes, place them on the ground, or connect them with other boxes. Certain energy fields can prevent either you or the boxes from passing through them, and you can use the boxes or your body to activate and deactivate these fields via pressure switches. Using your gloves, you can also magnetize the boxes to one of 2 polarities, and also turn the gravity of these boxes off or on. That's the basic majority of what you have at your disposal when approaching each puzzle, but it quickly becomes fairly complex, even early on. However, despite the complexity of interactions and mechanics at play, Relicta does a really good job of onboarding the player, which kept me from getting overwhelmed too quickly. Each area is split up into mini puzzle rooms, much like Portal, and solving each puzzle allows you to access the next part of the level, or in this case, the biome. Complete the biome and head on to the next area. While Relicta doesn't have the same kind of charm that Portal does, it uses a lot of those key features and ideas to craft a unique puzzle experience. Messing around with the magnetism and gravity is a lot of fun, and while it can also be mind-bending at times, finally reaching that eureka moment is incredibly satisfying. Relicta is also pretty to look at, and the variety of biomes found on the base makes for interesting and varied scenery to serve as the backdrop to your puzzle-solving antics. I was dreading playing this game, as I figured the puzzle mechanics were going to be too much for me to keep a handle on, but I was pleasantly surprised by Relicta. Easy to learn but hard to master are the keys to a good puzzle game, and Relicta definitely seems to have that part figured out. If you like a good puzzle challenge, and especially if you enjoyed the Portal series, you're going to have a lot of fun with Relicta.
Morkredd is a physics-based co-op puzzle game involving light and darkness. You play as 2 characters trying to traverse a world shrouded in darkness. You'll be rolling a ball of light along with you to keep you safe, as a touch of darkness will be enough to kill you. However, staying near the ball of light isn't enough. Both characters, and any objects you pass, will cast a shadow, so you'll always need to carefully maneuver around to avoid casting a shadow on one another. While this game does involve 2 characters and supports co-op, you can actually play entirely alone. And while I didn't get to try the co-op, the single-player mode works very well, and it actually might be easier than trying to coordinate movements with another person. You control each character with each joystick, with an action button being assigned to each shoulder button. If your character ends up on different sides of the screen than where they started, you can tap the A button to swap which joystick controls which character so that you won't get confused. So far, the puzzles have been fun, with clever uses of light and shadow, and the music and sound design make me just want to spend a ton of time in this world, despite how dark and depressing it is. If you enjoy some chill puzzling and a solid atmosphere, definitely give Morkredd a try. Size Matters is a first-person science simulation game that has you trying to mix up a formula to stop yourself from shrinking. Despite knowing this before I started playing, I completely forgot that my character was supposed to be shrinking over time because it happens so slowly and subtly. However, you will eventually get so small that you have to start moving objects around the room to be able to reach countertops and use your lab equipment, so the key is to work quickly. All of your formulas and ingredients are randomized and hidden around the room. You can choose to start mixing things as you find them, but I preferred doing a full sweep of the room to find everything before I started mixing. Formulas will tell you how to mix 2 ingredients, microwave an ingredient, or use an ingredient with a combination code, all to make new ingredients, eventually making key ingredients that can be combined into the cure for your shrinkage. It's a novel idea, but I felt there wasn't enough variety to hold my interest for long. You can change different settings like how fast you shrink, or make the ingredients breakable, but you'll always have the same machines to work with. And I think adding a little more complexity in that aspect would help, especially if you don't know what machines you'll be working with each time you play. The game is also in need of a bit of polish. I found a recipe in a drawer and it ended up encountering some wonky physics and getting stuck, which is not super great for a key recipe. I enjoyed playing through a couple of times to get a successful run, but without a progression system or any sort of missions, after that it becomes a question of how much fun you can have by setting up challenges for yourself in the settings, which isn't really of interest to me. The game does still get significant updates, so who knows what the future holds.
Fury Unleashed is an action platformer roguelite from developer Awesome Game Studios and released in May of last year. Players take control of the titular Fury as you battle your way through comic panel-inspired levels. Each panel represents one screen, and the entire page defines how the level as a whole is laid out. It's a really cool visual representation of the stages and screens, and feels reminiscent of the classic game Comic Zone. Fury has a gun, melee weapon, grenade, and superpower at their disposal. Each of these can be upgraded or replaced with new stuff you find as you progress through the game. I'm already impressed by the variety of guns available, as in my short time with the game, I managed to find a rocket launcher, flamethrower, and some kind of dark energy gun. Each one felt uniquely powerful, and made choosing which one I wanted to use kind of tough. The melee weapons I've encountered so far haven't been as exciting, with all of them feeling kind of the same. However, with the variety of guns available, I'm hopeful that I'll find some cooler melee options down the line. Other than their offensive abilities, Fury can also run, double jump, and mid-air dash to get around and help fight enemies. As you kill enemies, you'll be building up a combo meter. Depending on what equipment and upgrades you've unlocked, having a higher combo meter can offer you a lot of different power-ups and helpful abilities. During my time, for example, I managed to unlock a skill that gave enemies a higher chance to drop health pickups, as long as my combo was above 3. The combo system is a lot of fun to engage with, even just on the surface level of making the number get bigger because you do combo. The game even promises the idea of beating the entire game in one long combo, and although that sounds more like a distant dream, it also sounds really damn cool. Players can also customize the look of Fury, using a number of pre-made costumes, some of which you start with, while others are unlocked via gameplay milestones or quests. The customization also offers Steam Workshop support, which doesn't have a ton of user-created content, but I did manage to find this pretty sweet Megabyte head for my Fury. Fury Unleashed also has local co-op, but they're also currently beta testing online co-op, which sounds like something I'm definitely going to try once it's fully added into the game. Overall, I absolutely loved my time with Fury Unleashed. It reminds me a lot of Rogue Legacy and Dead Cells, which are some of the best when it comes to roguelikes of this nature. If you enjoy those type of games, or if the idea of Contra mixed with a little Metroidvania sounds like something you could sink your teeth into, definitely check out Fury Unleashed.
Levelhead is a platformer creator in the same vein as Mario Maker, developed and published by small indie studio Butterscotch Shenanigans. You play as an employee, working for the Bureau of Shipping, responsible for training a delivery robot known as GR-18. You train GR-18 by guiding them through limited exercises for evaluating employee limitations. or levels. This is, of course, just the developers making up a very entertaining story, aligning with the gameplay elements of this creative, unique game. If you have played other games from Butterscotch Shenanigans, such as Crashlands or my personal favorite, Quadrupus Rampage, then you know what kind of storytelling and vibrant art style to expect. The developer has a great sense of humor, and the campaign had really great writing, which made me laugh out loud, admittedly, more than once. As you play through the 90 handcrafted levels of the campaign, you'll learn the language of Levelhead, how objects interact, what type of enemies exist, what powers do what, etc. This prepares you for the very comprehensive yet uncomplicated level editor, which is where the real fun begins. You'll be guided through a quick tutorial, which may be a bit overwhelming if you haven't completed the campaign yet, as you may see some items that you haven't quite interacted with. But it's still pretty simple to get something created with the basics. The game isn't just a carbon copy of Mario Maker though. Besides the story being quite unique, the way that levels are discovered is really different. Instead of using hashtags and just being thrown into a list that Nintendo made from those hashtags, you have two main options. You can play games in the marketing department, which allow you to earn exposure bucks, or EB, so that you can boost your own levels or tip levels that you have played in hopes that enough people play them so that they will graduate to the tower. The tower is where levels go that have graduated from the marketing department, meaning they have almost a guarantee of being pretty awesome. These levels can be played individually or in a playlist called a series, and from my experience, there is a reason they have graduated. They were a lot of fun. Levelhead is an ambitious game, and it can be really easy to get a level creation game wrong, but I think Butterscotch Shenanigans really nailed it here. I'll definitely be playing more of this, and I hope to see some levels from the Bombchu community in the marketing department soon.
Cook Serve Delicious 3 is the latest in the cooking simulation series. If you aren't familiar with the previous two games, each day you'll set a menu of food items you want to cook, and then you'll cook it for people through an interface of clicks or button presses, combined with a bit of timing and multitasking. Simple to learn, hard to master, especially when you hit rushes of people asking for more complicated orders at once. Changing things around this time, and without spoiling the story, you no longer work in a restaurant, but in a food truck. This changes the gameplay a bit by getting rid of the smaller flows of customers between the lunch and dinner rushes, and instead giving you some prep time as you drive to each location for the day. But spend that time well, because once you reach a location, it's non-stop orders. Depending on how well you do, you'll be awarded a medal and some cash, which you can use to buy new menu items. As someone who found the second game in the series a little too hectic, I was much less overwhelmed starting out in this latest entry. But after doing well for a few rounds, I let it go to my head, set up a menu that was way too complicated, and experienced utter failure. But worry not, if you enjoy cooking up the complicated meals and don't enjoy the stress of so many customers fighting for your attention at once, you can switch to chill mode, where the customers have infinite patience, and things are, well, a lot more chill. Cook Serve Delicious 3 is a nice progression for the series that will cater both to people who enjoyed the complexity of 2 and those who preferred the simplicity of the first. And hot damn, the music is great. Crank it up, Andron. Hellpoint is a futuristic Souls-like in space. You've got your very deliberate feeling moveset, your checkpoints to spend your money/experience and restore your healing items, as well as the drop all your money on death mechanic. It is very much a Souls-like game and does not shy away from that, but it does do a few things a bit differently, for better or worse. For one, you don't need an item for multiplayer. You can just bring a friend in or go to your friend's world by opening it up to them. Also, there are guns. I can't use them because my character's not smart enough to wield guns, but they are there. You can also earn charges of healing items between checkpoints by defeating enemies, which might push you to explore a bit further, albeit carefully, when you're low on health. Of course, you might die anyway, or maybe not. I swear that health bar is empty, but who am I to complain? Another cool mechanic is that your weapons have experience bars, and as they fill up, the weapons get stronger, and in some cases even unlock special moves. Tyler and I played this together for a few hours, and while we had fun for a bit, the enemies started becoming tedious and uninteresting to fight, and the area layouts all got very confusing, which was not helped by the fact that checkpoints are not linked to one another unless you spend a consumable item to link them. It's hard to know which ones you'll actually want to come back to frequently on your first playthrough, so we ended up hoarding this item and just having to muddle our way around until we found a shortcut back to the observatory. It's got some interesting secrets if you're willing to take the time to understand how to find them, and it has a cool mixture of sci-fi and occult themes, but it just wasn't fun enough to make me want to finish it. It's not a bad way to dip your toe into the Souls-like genre, but there are better options out there to spend your time and energy with.
Darksiders Genesis is a hack-and-slash game from developer Airship Syndicate and released in December of 2019. Genesis is a prequel to the rest of the Darksiders series, and helps to set up some of the events from those games. Genesis introduces us to the fourth horseman, Strife, as well as his brother and fellow horseman, War. The two are on a mission to investigate the demon Samael, who is suspected of conspiring with Lucifer to upset some kind of worldly balance, blah blah blah, time to kill a bunch of monsters. I'm not familiar with the story or lore of the Darksiders series, so a lot of this goes right over my head. It also doesn't help that the game doesn't do a whole lot to try and onboard fans new to the series. Instead, you're just dropped into this world, and while the general story is presented in a straightforward manner, the nuance and details of how the world works and who the key players are is completely lost on people like me. Graphically, the game looks fine. It's a third-person lockdown camera hack-and-slash game, so I'm not expecting anything amazing. There's some nice color and detail to the characters, and the overall character design is pretty great. I'm not a big fan of the lockdown camera, as it left me wishing I could rotate or at least zoom to be able to get a better feel for my surroundings. I'm also not a huge fan of the semi-open world design of the levels. Each area feels very large, but unnecessarily so. There's a few bits to explore and find hidden side objectives, and you're given a horse to traverse lengthier sections, but it all feels like it's in service of itself. You have the horse to explore the big areas, but why have the big areas in the first place? So many sections of the early level felt large for the sake of being large, and I quickly found myself getting quite bored. What's not boring, however, is the combat, which is where Genesis truly shines. Each of the two playable characters have different approaches to combat, and you can swap between them at any time. Strife uses guns for the most part, as well as a few quick slash and dash type attacks. Power-ups give Strife different types of ammo to use for his guns, such as a charge shot I found that proved fairly useful. War is all about that close combat, using his large sword to smash through enemies. No matter who you're playing as, combat is fun and engaging, with a variety of simple combos and abilities you can pull off relatively easily. It makes slaying wave after wave of generic enemies stay surprisingly fresh and fun, and was mostly what kept me going through my time with the game. While I wouldn't consider Darksiders Genesis a bad game by any means, it was just incredibly mediocre overall. The combat was fun, sure, but the story wasn't really clicking with me in any meaningful way, and my lack of familiarity with the series meant the setting, characters, or lore were all a mystery to me without doing a lot of independent research. If you're a fan of the Darksiders series, you'll probably want to check this game out, just to see the Fourth Horseman as well as to see how it all began. Hardcore hack-and-slash fans who aren't familiar with Darksiders might find the combat engaging enough to stick around, but for everyone else, including myself, I just can't see myself recommending Darksiders Genesis. Metro Exodus is a first-person shooter developed by 4A Games and released in February of 2019. Exodus takes place in the Metro universe of games and novels, and is the latest entry in the video game series. The Metro universe is one that has been devastated by nuclear war, and much of the planet's surface is now irradiated. However, it might not be as bad as we once thought. Players control Artyom, a man who is sick of living in the underground metro system, and longs to prove that there is life outside of Moscow, some of it even on the Earth's surface. Before long, you and your wife Anna discover an active train on the surface, and are led down a rabbit hole of conspiracy, life-altering events, danger, and death as you attempt to make your way east in search of a new life. Gameplay is fairly standard first-person shooter fare. There's more of an emphasis on survival, so expect to be somewhat low on ammo for the most part. Artyom is not Master Chief or Doom Guy, so don't expect to absorb a ton of bullets while spraying down your enemies. A few quick bursts from an enemy machine gun and you're going to go down, at least on the normal difficulty. I found more success in combat by sneaking around and at least attempting stealth takedowns, only resorting to straightforward shoot the bad guy when I had to. While later levels promise a somewhat more open-world approach to their design, the bit that I played was fairly linear, and looking at some of the Steam reviews online, open world definitely seems like the wrong way to describe Metro Exodus. It seems there are multiple paths and ways to progress to each level, but there's still levels, so you'll be going from A to B for the most part. Overall, the gameplay is pretty standard, and doesn't do anything to try and stand out, but it also doesn't detract from the experience. The story is alright, I guess. I don't know if it's just because I'm not already a fan of the series, characters, or setting, but nothing about Exodus was really drawing me in. It just feels like a Russian version of Fallout, with trains and subways instead of vaults. Also, the voice acting, at least in English, is kind of horrible. I'm no Russian expert, so I'm probably not the best person to judge a Russian accent, but certainly it should sound better than this. The story isn't necessarily bad, it's just a very meh opening hook that didn't work for me. The characters I've met so far are pretty one-note, but hopefully given more time to spend with each of them, they can develop into something more than just a Soviet cardboard cutout. While my time with Exodus was overall rather forgettable, I'd be lying if I said I still wasn't somewhat intrigued by what this game has to offer. The atmosphere and setting are very well done, and graphically the game looks amazing. Steam reviews are mostly positive, and fans of the series say the story and narrative for Exodus was really well done. Maybe Exodus just has a mediocre opening before it finds its footing. So for now, Metro Exodus isn't something I'd say I would jump right back into and dump all my time into once I'm done with this review. However, I wouldn't mind coming back to it when my backlog clears up a bit to see what else is going on underneath the surface.
Overall, I had a decent time with my half of the bundle, with nothing that really annoyed me or had me questioning why it was in a bundle. Size matters won't get me a ton of playtime, but I did enjoy the time I spent with it. Summertime Madness felt like a good fit as a really polished Humble original, but I need to vent a bit about how Humble handles these originals. First, the originals are barely advertised as an afterthought below the 12 main games in each bundle. Worse, there's no information presented about the game, and clicking on it just takes you to where you can download it, with no pictures or description to help you understand what it is. Thankfully, a lot of originals these days have Steam pages up already, so you can get more info there. But then that begs the question, why is Humble giving us DRM-free copies of games that are on Steam? And if it's special enough to be a Humble original and be DRM-free, why isn't Humble presenting any information about the game through their site? They don't even cover the originals in their official monthly video describing all the choice games. Figure it out, Humble.
I was pretty pleasantly surprised by this month's bundle. There's a few mediocre titles in here for me, especially when it comes to the headliners, but the indie titles and lesser known games in here were all pretty good. Some of them were just okay, like Family Man, but games like Fury Unleashed and Vane left me more than satisfied with my purchase this month. No single title really stood out as spectacular, but the overall quality of the bundle makes this an easy month to recommend.
If you're interested, here's a cost breakdown of each of the games.
And finally, a huge thank you and shout out to Michael Slater, Blake Harms, and all of our other glorious patrons over on Patreon. Your continued support means the world to us, and helps make videos like this one possible. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.